Well, let's talk about this with Fleur Hassan-Nahoum. She's Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy and a former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem and joins us now. Very good morning to you, Fleur.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Donald Trump says that nuclear program in Iran was obliterated by those bunker-busting bombs. The report says that they weren't. He says that's all fake news, that's a lie, that's been done. What's the Israeli government's assessment?
Well, the Israeli government is still assessing, which I think is a smart thing to do. We're talking about a very complicated nuclear facility dug deep into a mountain, reinforced with some special concrete. And ultimately, we're not rushing and grandstanding. We're trying to actually scientifically assess what was done. But let me tell you what Israel did, which then America complemented. Israel managed to assassinate all of the scientists that enrich uranium. It hit some other nuclear facilities, because unfortunately there's not just one. And then we needed the United States with those bunker-busting bombs to create damage to that installation that is deep in the ground. So either way you look at it, they've been set back very significantly, and it'll take a while. And honestly, Julia, I'm hoping that with all of this ceasefire, and last night we all had the first night's sleep.
I was going to ask you about that.
In weeks, yeah. The first night's sleep.
Well,
but I have to tell you that we need an agreement for the Islamic Republic of Iran to say no more enrichment, because they don't just risk our lives here in Israel, they risk the entire region and the world. If these people, these are apocalyptic jihadists, which means that the doctrine of mutual deterrence doesn't exist with them, because they're quite happy to sacrifice their lives for the next life and everything waiting for them there. And so you're not dealing with rational people. And this is why we couldn't wait one more week.
Listen, I have no issue whatsoever with backing your attacks and Israeli attacks on Iran as a defensive measure. Absolutely justified, no question at all. In the wake of them funding Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthi rebels and their own attacks, and indeed terror plots here, the threat to the Middle East. I've got no issue with that. Our own Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, there, our own Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, completely dodged those questions. I mean, even again today, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, completely dodging the question about whether or not it was the right thing to do and whether it was the legal thing to do. What have you made of that?
I think that Winston Churchill would be rolling in his grave to see that Britain, the country that saved the world in the 30s and 40s, the country that stood up against the most evil dictator, now can't even decide whether the Allies and the only democracy in the Middle East, which side they're on. They are what? Siding with Islamic terrorists who have killed British servicemen and women, American servicemen and women, French servicemen and women, and of course, many, many Jews. And if they can't now be so clear or morally clear about who the good guys and the bad guys are, I think you guys are in trouble.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I found it utterly bewildering, I have to say. What did you also make of Donald Trump and what he had to say yesterday, including dropping not just a bunker-busting bomb, but the F-bomb? Let's have a little watch and a listen.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
You ever fought in Iraq?
It's pretty unusual for a major political leader to use such language in public. He sounded pretty frustrated, Fleur, but not just the Iranians, but the Israelis as well. Do you know what the F you're doing?
I think we do, because if we didn't, then the Iranians would have had a nuclear bomb 10 years ago. And what nobody sees is all of the different intelligence missions by the Mossad to push back again their development of weapons-grade uranium. What you see at the end of it is the point that we couldn't push back anymore without causing considerable damage. Look, I understand President Trump is frustrated with what's going on. He's a businessman, and he just sees things as more transactional. Unfortunately, like I said, when you have an apocalyptic, genocidal Islamist regime, there's no logic to any of it. They actually not just broke the ceasefire in the first 2 hours. That morning, yesterday morning, they killed 4 innocent people, including two 18-year-old kids.
Yeah, I mean, it does appear, though, that it is holding now. We know many ceasefires. It was very much poo-pooed by many in the commentators and military people here, but actually it is the norm, actually, that most ceasefires do see, points where it is broken in the early days.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, Julia, I think that Netanyahu and Trump pulled off a real kind of sleight of hand here last month when, when the media was announcing that there was a rift and there were, words between them and all this. And in the end, it wasn't true at all. It was all a sleight of hand in order to trick the Iranians, and it worked.
Let me read you a report that's on the BBC in the last 24 hours. At least 46 people waiting for aid have been killed by Israeli fire in 2 incidents in central and southern Gaza, according to rescuers and hospitals. UN agencies have condemned the US and Israel-backed food distribution system, with one official calling it an abomination and a death trap. And they say that the UN said that more than 410 Palestinians are reported to have been killed by Israeli gunfire or shelling since the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began work in late May. I've seen reports where from the BBC where people are quoted as saying it's like the Hunger Games for Palestinians who are forced to go and get aid, walking often long distances, and then apparently, according to these reports, facing gunfire from Israeli Defense Force soldiers, men, women, innocent children being killed, taken to hospital. Reports coming out from not just the Hamas-run health ministry, but also Western medics working in hospitals, and from, we're told, onlookers. What's your response to that report?
I had £1 for every time the BBC got something wrong with this conflict and blamed Israel unjustifiably, to then have a weak apology. Oh, sorry, we didn't mean this. Or yes, we should have verified. Then I'd be rich by now. What I can tell you, Julia, is that the only people killing Gazans going to get the food are Hamas. And you know why? Because they're getting desperate as they lose control of the grip they have as the ruling party, as the ruling governing body of Gaza. We saw it 2 weeks ago when they killed 9 aid workers. Let me tell you, Julia, I sat down with the people running this humanitarian foundation. They are feeding people like no other month. These months, they've distributed something like 33 million meals, which is way more than Hamas actually allowed the innocent people of Gaza to keep. They were stealing the aid, and with that, they were funding the offense against Israel. And this is why we had to find an alternative. And the problem is that the only information coming out is either from the Gaza Health Ministry or Al Jazeera, Goebbels TV, and the UN, which gets it the same information and the same numbers from the same sources. So there's a recycling of the same source. And by the time it gets to the second or third party in the UN, they present it as something legitimate when it isn't. And that's the problem. But you could already begin to see the Gazans coming out against Hamas because they've been empowered by this.
It is interesting. We had Colonel Richard Kemp, a former British commander of British forces in Afghanistan. He was on the show yesterday, and he was saying he'd been out with the humanitarian aid body, and he'd spoken to lots of people individually, and he said no one had any concerns about the IDF shooting at them. Their concerns were about Hamas, and that he said people did not appear to be remotely starving or desperate, as we're seeing. And this is the thing. I hear reports every day on the BBC and other media in this country, and I know because I talk to friends who are otherwise good, sensible, wise people who believe every single word, and they believe this is happening. This is now common knowledge in this country. The perceived view is that people are physically starving and emaciated. They're being starved in a famine, in a mass genocide in Gaza. And when the IDF soldiers are guarding those who are bringing this aid, they are shooting them, massacring them. What I find really strange, and I've raised this before, is that we see video footage coming out of Gaza all the time. I mean, 1.5 million mobile phones in Gaza. I've yet to see a single bit of footage, one little bit. I scour social media, one single bit of footage, including on the BBC, which claims these things are happening as fact, of these actual massacres. And yet, and you're reporting it back. But
they're lies.
But what is Israel going to do about that? Because when the world and when the commentariat and when the journalists and when the politicians and the voters in the Western world all think that this is what you are doing, and yes, I'm sure there are civilians who are shot and there are some rogue IDF soldiers along the way, no government, no military action is ever perfect. But if they think this is deliberate policy and this is happening on a mass scale, which is what is being reported every day, this damages Israel.
It's already damaged Israel. And yes, you can talk about double standards in the media, and you can talk about the fact that, conflicts which are much worse than this are not reported at all. And the other day, 50 Christians were butchered in Egypt, not a peep from anyone. There is definitely double standards against Israel. But Julia, on this point, I'm going to look in the mirror and say something which I have a bellyache about, and is the fact that Israel does not take the media war seriously enough. This is what I fight for in this country internally as a politician.
It's a propaganda war that you're losing.
I fight for the fact that we need to do something about it. We need to have a strategy, because all the misinformation is delegitimizing our country, people, and our cause.
And this is it. I'm not putting the Israeli case. I just want to only discuss facts, because I think that's what matters on the ground. Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Claire Pissell, I mean, just on that side of things, I know Gaza's out of the news quite a lot at the moment, but again, this morning I heard a report on the BBC. I do it just to torture myself. I do it again. Do you know what I do? I had to know how not to do it. Oh, by the way, we're going to talk later in the show about the BBC being told in editorial guidelines, you have to really be willing to report on things that you disagree with. No, really? I mean, wow, what a mind-blowing thing. You're a journalist paid for by taxpayers and you have to be told that? I mean, good grief. But this is a really big issue. They are reporting stuff. I was a news reporter, long time before I gave my opinion. You have to report who did what, when, where and why. You need to report facts. You can't just say, oh, well, some guy who's taken hostages and tortured and raped people, but he says this has happened. I mean, really, is this person a reliable source? You haven't got a video of it, but there were thousands of people there. Not one person got their mobile phone out. Not one.
And that's the thing, because surely you're supposed to also double source this. I've learnt this from the husband in the world of newspapers. As the same as you.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that backup, then why are you going to take one person's opinion on what they have seen as the gospel truth, and that's what you're going to put on your homepage of your
especially when we're paying for you.
Precisely.